One of the main leaders of the Stop DeSoto shelter actually emailed saying, actually, I'd like to see an alligator Alcatraz for the homeless out in the rural East, which is so far away from transit or jobs or wraparound resources. I mean, if that's your solution to treat people like garbage and put them in a landfill somewhere else so you don't have to feel guilty about throwing them away, that's on you and your morality. I love the saying, you get what you pay for. Because if you're not actively trying to get these solutions and use your tax dollars to fund these solutions, then you're going to continue to have this shortage that's going to lead to more people with nowhere else to go but on the streets or in their cars. And some people just have hate in their hearts and you're not going to convince them. You're not. But there's many others that are just genuinely scared. They want their kids to be able to walk to school and they don't really understand the nuances of addressing the various crises that happen at every level in our community. And so they bucket that problem into one bucket and they just hear a project coming and they just say no. You have to, in running for office, be ready to take some of that heat and be ready to be an educator and pierce through some of that noise.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tracy Lewis with Imagine Marketing, and I'm joined by Pastor Scott, who is the founder and CEO of Matthew's Hope, as well as Lee Perry, who is founder of Lee Perry Strategies LLC, among many other things. This podcast is produced, filmed, and edited by John Burkett with Imagine. Welcome to this week's episode of Straight Talk, No BS with Matthew's Hope, presented by Imagine Marketing. At Imagine Marketing, we put in the extra effort to craft a tailored strategy for success. Book a free consultation today. Lee is actually going to join us for 2 episodes, but in this one, we're going to be focusing on inspiring civic engagement and why local politics matter. Lee, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Our producer was going to script an introduction for you like we normally do, but your website lists so many accomplishments that he wasn't able to make it concise enough. So why don't you tell our audience what they should know about you, and don't be shy.
Of course. Thank you so much. So I'm actually a campaign strategist. I meet with people, especially nonprofits or organizations that need to get a policy across the finish line, and I help create the strategy for how they accomplish those things. Currently, I'm here that I mostly want to talk about the Support Orlando Shelters campaign, which I launched last year after the Kaylee Ave Work Release Center was shut down. The project was shut down before it even really started because of a coalition of people who came out of a community actually pretty far away from where the project was actually taking place to shut it down.
How about not even close? She's being nice. They weren't even close.
Wow.
And so a swell of residents came to me and asked me to help them build out that strategy. So that's the hat I'm wearing, but I wear so many hats and help a lot of different organizations get some policy passed.
That was great. So much attention is given to national politics that many people might either be unaware of what is taking place locally or may think that local politics don't really have an impact on their lives compared to what they see in the news every day. What would your message be to those people about the significance of being engaged in local politics?
Well, I just want to start with politics doesn't have to be a drag. We can actually have fun and we can get some things done, and you can scratch that itch of hopelessness when you engage in what's going on in your local community. I think right now the system is really kind of broken for the everyday people, but it's working really well for the special interests that are profiting millions of dollars off of the system right now. And it can be really defeating for the average person who feels like a tiny little data point on the overall scope of how politics influences our lives, especially when you focus everything on the news is about the national level. But what local government is everything intersectional to what's outside your front door. You know, whether or not you see enough trees on your commute to work, whether or not you see, some of the most vulnerable people in our community getting resources, whether or not you see, a lot of roadkill and you care about the native species in our community and want to make sure that they're protected. That all really starts and ends with your local elected officials. And if you're anything like I was just 5 years ago, I didn't understand the difference between federal, state, local, county, and municipal elections. It wasn't until I started doing activism around a forest that they were trying to put a toll road through, that I started becoming aware of what a campaign even was and how you can actually build political power. And that's when I got the call from Commissioner Nicole Wilson, who was campaigning at the time, and asked me to run her office. I originally said no because I was like, I don't know anything about what a commissioner even does, honestly. But she said, you have a good heart and an activism spirit. So I want you in my office. And my life has changed since then.
That is amazing. How do commissioners balance competing demands for funding and attention?
How do they balance it? I'll be honest with you, each commission office is so different. And this is why when I say local politics can be fun, it doesn't have to be boring. Because if you engage and you get somebody who's a champion from your community elected and not just somebody who was picked by the tourism industry or picked by the private developer industry to run, and you actually get someone from your community to run, I'm looking at you, Pastor Scott,
That actually cares.
somebody who really cares and has the heart of a leader. When you get them to run from your community, you can do great things, not just pass policy. You can do incredible, supply drives and outreach and all these things. And so I think that how different offices balance that, it comes down to how they prioritize their constituencies. Some offices, frankly, they pick up the phone for the CEO of a company before they ever pick up the phone of their own neighbor. They just usually sometimes will hire staff to do that. And they themselves don't have a personal investment on making sure that every constituent call is completed from start to end. But when you elect someone from the community that cares, they're going to be very hands-on. And your experience with that elected official, Democrat, Republican, Independent, it doesn't matter. They want us to think that those things matter. But what matters is, are they accountable and are they accessible as leaders?
I love that. What actually helps move an issue like addressing our area's homelessness crisis up the list of priorities for local government officials?
So this one's a little spicy.
Yes.
This one's a little spicy, and I'll tell you why. And I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, but I don't care.
Let it go.
When you have an activist heart and you get into office, you'll find out from mostly staff who are not really given permission to be honest and vocal. They'll pull you aside and say, we've always wanted to do a project in that district, but the commissioner who was there before never had the political will wanting to do that. And it's not until you started coming in and asking questions did we feel emboldened to champion a project like that. But at this moment, there's so many elected officials who maybe they want to, but they've seen public pushback happen so fast, even when a whisper of a project happens, that they just don't entertain a project because they're scared. And when I say a project, I mean a shelter or an assisted living facility specifically geared towards low income even, or an affordable housing project. It doesn't just have to be, a project just for the unhoused. People come out in droves against it before they even understand the full scope of the project.
Yeah.
And so from a political angle, elected officials are scared, so they don't even entertain those projects. You have to, in running for office, be ready to take some of that heat and be ready to be an educator in the role. Be willing to sit down and have tough conversations with people and pierce through some of that noise. It's unfortunate, and I'm sure this is going to become a topic of this conversation, that some people just have hate in their hearts and you're not going to convince them. You're not. But there's many others that are just genuinely scared. They want their kids to be able to walk to school, and they don't really understand the nuances of addressing the various crises that happen at every level in our community and how someone could get themselves into substance abuse or being homeless. And so they bucket that problem into one bucket, and they just hear a project's coming and they just say no because they're scared. You as an elected leader and as an office can be a conduit to educating those people to be less afraid. And that's your job. It's a lot more work than just forwarding the email to an aide that's just going to give them a boiler template response,
Mhm.
right? So that's part of why local government is so important.
Mm.
And it is huge because I would love to. I think there's two things. There's we talk about a lot of should we limit how long someone can be in office and things. There's two sides of that. One, someone who's there longer, they know how it works and they know the system. The other side is you're there too long. And so you're there too long because you've appeased a lot of people, the people that have the money, the bucket, the supporters. But did you really represent your total constituency?
Mhm.
I would love to see my favorite kind of political leader is the one that says, if I'm out in four, I'm fine.
Mhm.
Okay. Because they're more likely to get something done. The challenge is that I have seen where other commissioners, councilmen, what have you, have literally blocked that person out from even understanding where the paper goods were kept.
Yeah.
Okay. Because that way they can control their agenda better if this person doesn't even really know where to look. And I've watched this happen. It's very tough for someone in their first time around in any office to really fully have a grasp of what's going on for probably about, in my opinion, about 2 years. And then you start getting an idea, start getting your footing, and then it's time to go back and get reelected again. So maybe you can do something about the next time. That's just an outsider looking in and having friends that are in politics that have told me this. They go, it's crazy. But when you take someone who has nothing to lose, those people get things done.
Yeah.
That's why, I've toyed with the idea. My history, it takes so long to vet me. It would not. It's just not worth it. And I've told everybody
We're looking for a mayoral candidate for county commission.
Can you? Oh my God! First off, I just God, who knows? I mean, I'm really open with my past. I don't hide it, but I'm sure everybody would want to retrash it again. But really, when you have nothing to lose, I've always taken the position I got nothing to lose. If they say no, what did I have before I asked?
Mhm.
I already made my own no, right? So I have nothing. So if I ask and it goes my way, then awesome. But I will tell you that I really think that too often we're getting caught up in the way politics are funded has become, it's just a problem.
Yeah.
And it has been a problem since we really started our country. When special interests get in top, and I'm, someone could say, well, homelessness is a special interest. Okay. I'm talking about special interests at a whole
Are you a
level.
billionaire yet?
Yeah, well, exactly. Not exactly. In fact, I was jokingly saying that my retirement plan is that should I become homeless again, I'm hoping someone says, hey, isn't that guy that helped those homeless people? We ought to invite him in. Okay, that scares the hell out of Charlene when I tell her that because she's hoping there's a bigger plan than that.
Well, I really want to bring up term limits. You had mentioned about how, elected officials should really have term limits. I've seen both. I've seen where there's no real term limit, but there still are elections, like the city of Orlando. And then I've seen where you only have maybe 2 terms at the county of 4-year terms each, right? I want you to look at that just a slightly different way because the scope of a project like a shelter takes a minimum of maybe 5 to 10 years from start to finish, from researching the land to acquiring it to, doing the remodeling and getting all the permissions and the community meetings and the permitting and rezonings and all of that takes a long time. I think where the problem really lies is that right now we have, a Democratic Party and a Republican Party that are supposed to be, and of course, independents that are supposed to be looking and recruiting candidates based on, their community relevancy and then running them for office. That's not actually happening. What's actually happening is there are industry players that all year meet with their stakeholders and try to find and recruit their own yes men or women in different districts that they want to be strategic. And they just put a D or an R next to their name based on what the statistics are in that race to get them to win. So that when they get on the board and they have political power, they'll vote whatever way that they want you to vote. So regardless of the term limits, someone can be in there and just be a potato and just sit and just do whatever the special interest wants and not actually champion any real, human rights solutions to the things that you're facing in your community. Um, or they can get in there and maybe work on one project, but if they're term limited, they might not have enough time to see the project all the way through fruition. And then the next person will have to either carry it or let it die or kill it.
Yeah.
I would probably look at it a different way, especially if we had the power to take money out of politics, which would be just make sure that your civic engagement is strong. You don't necessarily have to put a short cap on how long you serve, but make sure that just like in the city elections, that the voter turnout rate is high enough that if you're doing a bad job, you're going to get voted out.
Yeah.
And you have to be beholden to your constituent base. Because we have a low turnout in municipal elections, sometimes we end up getting really bad leaders and things don't change because there's just the rollover of elections and people aren't showing up to vote.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate you saying that, because that's why I was saying a little earlier is that there's two sides of this, because of the fact that if you do limit them is the fact that they cannot push that project through. People don't realize, it can take, sometimes it's 2 years past something when it starts to show itself.
Mm-hmm.
And they forget that's what happens. That's reality. You can keep blaming the last guy and you can keep doing all that stuff. But if we stop just for a moment and say, okay, but what is it our constituents want? I look at it this way. What has bothered me is that, again, I call them taxpayer funded public servants. That's what they are. And the general public doesn't think of it that way. So that means they literally work for you. Okay. But if you don't show up at the polls, then you're going to get exactly what it is you're going to get. Yeah. You're going to have no choice. And I think that's, again, when all of a sudden you have less than a 30% turnout, who knows who's going to get in there? Mm-hmm. And that's going to be really easy for a special interest to push their agenda through. And then you sit there and go, oh, now I can't do anything. So, no, I agree with you 100% on that. I just wanted to throw that we've got two sides of that. We got that I've seen some that literally, I know these people that are the walking dead. I've met with them. They've been in office so long, it's like they don't even talk to us. Their aides do all the talking. Because they're safe. They're just like, they don't even know they're in the room.
They're not scared of getting, replaced.
I don't know. I'm not sure if they know they could be replaced. Literally the walking dead. I won't name names. Yeah. There's a reason I'm an independent. Because I'm a crossbreed offender. I don't care. Yeah. Okay, what RD doesn't matter to me. I was Republican most of my life. That's just the truth. Mm-hmm. And then people always said to me, but you're this. And I'm going, yeah, well, here's the thing. Here's why I'm a Republican. And then what happened is Republicans weren't Republicans anymore, in my opinion. But I didn't feel I was a Democrat either. I feel personally, and I'm going to vote the person I think is most qualified. But here's what I'm also not going to do. I'm not going to vote for someone just because they take my issue. Mm-hmm. I'm going to look at what else they believe, because I don't believe in killing everybody else's issue so mine becomes the forefront. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. And also it's who shows up, who gives out their personal cell and actually answers the phone when they're on the campaign trail or when they're in the community. And, the best type of leader is someone who's already birthed from the community.
Yeah.
And is active on not just one, but many issues. And so, that's really how you should look at politics. An example of a project, the Work Release Center off of Cayley Avenue. I didn't know much about the project before it was killed because actually, I knew a little bit because at the time, this is where the intersectionality of the environment and homelessness comes in over and over again. But at the time, I am running the Save Split Oak Forest campaign, and the city of Orlando was trying to annex 53,000 acres of rural land within one vote with very little community input. Literally the size of Baltimore in between, or the city of Orlando and Brevard County. They wanted to put another 500,000 homes and be able to annex it into the city so that the developers, Tavistock, could get away with having less environmental regulations because the county has more scrutinizing environmental regulations. Well, in order to kill that deal, the mayor of Orange County, Jerry Demings, went to the city and said, listen, we need to come together and stop you from annexing because, frankly, they want that tax base. It's not that they're environmentalists. They want that tax base. So they came to the deal and said, let's look at what properties we have to help you get the shelter space that you need. And that's when the Work Release Center became a bargaining chip in stopping that annexation process. So that's how much I knew at the time. But they had just started doing a bare assessment of the roof and some of the functions of the building before the community in the Soto area caught wind of it and started rallying. They created a website, they created a slogan and signs, and they started becoming, frankly, really aggressive, and killed the project before it even had wings, before they even had a real proposal or a coalition of partners to come together and talk about what wraparound resources could be offered. And, I was excited to hear about the project, but then it was dead. And I think a lot of people were shocked at how quick it went to nothing. Behind the scenes, there were hundreds of people coming with pitchforks, angry about the project, kind of perpetuating a lot of stigma and misinformed tropes about
it was a false narrative. I'll just say it. It was a false narrative. Okay. It was bullshit. Okay?
Yeah.
It just was. I mean, look, you look at this building. My favorite is when it was all dead. Well, the building was just going to be too costly to renovate. Every building I have over the last 16 years, and we have several houses and different buildings that were old, we renovated them. Especially when they're concrete, they have really good bones. I'm pretty sure that Kaylee property is concrete. But it had good bones. But the thing that bothered me, and I'm going to go back on we thought, but what bothered me at the end is when they said, well, it was just going to be too costly to renovate. No, when you look at that compared 9 times out of 10, that is just not true. Okay. It's a lot cheaper to renovate if you've got good bones. So I looked at a building that had good bones, and I looked at an area that had a need, and the no-brainer is again, it was a work release program.
Yeah.
They were criminals. They're on work release, and you're worried about criminals. Let me tell you about homeless people. Most of them aren't criminals, and the typical crimes that you're going to find are crimes of need.
Yeah. And I mean, before you can even debunk a myth, people are up in arms about something. When you actually pull back the curtain, you realize, like I said before, it's a lot of fear, but they didn't even give the city of Orlando the opportunity to, have community feedback opportunities. But I actually toured that facility, and the dollar amount that they're suggesting it would take to renovate that project, in comparison to starting a project from zero, with the permitting and the community meetings and just to get the bones, but also there's like dozens and dozens of beds already in there. There's already washing machine hookups. Bathroom stalls are already installed. Many, many sinks are already installed. I mean, everything you need, a huge walk-in refrigerator and walk-in freezer is already there with a huge commissary kitchen. So imagine trying to start a project from just an empty lot to a shelter would take a decade. And here we have this empty building that is right in an area that already has the zoning. I mean, it was very turnkey. And frankly, I think the convention center maybe needs less renovations. We could use some resources.
To God's ears.
We could use some resources. But that's when the other residents in the Soto area who were excited about the project called me out of the blue, probably because they saw my activism on the annexation, and said, hey, you're a campaign strategist. We want to get organized because we don't feel like those voices represent our community. And that's when I started the Support Orlando Shelter campaign.
Lee, what was the goal of that project, and what is this building you are referring to?
Yeah, so there was a work release center off of Cayley Avenue, which is in the downtown, kind of southern downtown area. And Soto is the area that's like southern downtown Soto. And this, off of Cayley and Orange, South Orange Avenue, kind of close to where the Pulse is currently. That is where the Work Release Center is. And it's kind of a perfect location considering that there's access to public transit. It's very walkable.
There's homeless people there.
Yeah. And frankly, one of the biggest voices against the project was actually one of the higher ups of Orlando Health, who apparently was perpetuating some of the same stigmas that some of the residents in the SoDo area, the southern downtown area, were also saying. Basically, that they didn't want to see crime rates go up. They didn't want to see more homeless people on their trips to school, sleeping around and, showing themselves on the street. I have a hard time articulating it just because, like, my response when I see someone who's on the streets is the opposite of go away. It's like, what can I do?
Isn't that the purpose of it, was to help the homeless?
The Work Release Center has been empty for some time, and the purpose of coming together was because we're out of shelter beds. I mean, downtown Orlando, especially,
for a long time.
If you're not in line by 3:00 to get a shelter bed for the night at, let's say, the Coalition for the Homeless, there's a cutoff. And because of that, there's a lot of people that are wrapped around the building, waiting, and then they're told, go somewhere else, we're out of beds. Well, when people are driving by that, they say, well, I don't want that in my community. Well, I love the saying, you get what you pay for. Because if you're not actively trying to get these solutions and use your tax dollars to fund these solutions, then you're going to continue to have this shortage that's going to lead to more people with nowhere else to go but on the streets or in their cars.
And that's where you're going to see it.
And I'll just say this too, is that when I first heard of this, I'm like, this is perfect. This is a no-brainer. It's ability that I was enough familiar with to go, God, someone like Matthew's Hope, I could whip that into shape in no time. And there are ways of doing it that you don't have people laying around the outside.
Right.
You look at any of my properties, you don't see people are always saying, well, I don't see people laying, because that's not how it works. It's just even like our buses. Okay, the sleeper buses we're putting into motion. We have a reservation system. We do background checks. There's so many things we do. And people say, well, what a waste of money. Well, it's because it's going to cost about, when you look at a shelter bus, you've got about $200,000 into getting it and renovating it. And it's going to cost you about $500,000 to care for it for the year. Gas, staffing, all the other things you have to do. It's a lot of money. But compared to building a building and how long it takes, I have a project in Brevard County right now I started working on 3.5 years ago, and we're just now getting to the point of permitting.
Wow.
Yeah.
3.5 years. My cost on doing that renovation to the building into transitional housing has gone up exponentially in that 3.5 years. Okay. Now people trust me, but now I don't know if I'm going to have the money to finish the project.
Mm-hmm.
But it took 3.5 years. And so here you have something, it's already got the plumbing in place. It's got the infrastructure. It's got the bones. It's got more than the bones. It's got some skin that you just have to add additional skin. And it's in an area that literally is already full of homeless people and already close to everything, public transportation. Because here's the other thing is, often people want to put something out there. The problem with putting something out there, wherever out there is, they can't get, how can they go to work? How can they do anything? Because
Then they start moving forward.
Right. How do you move them towards a life of independence, of self-sustainability? You can't.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just more taxpayer dollars.
Lee, let's talk about the Support Orlando Shelter campaign. How is that going?
How is it going? So I got
Going?
I got that call and I was like, oh, well, I don't know enough about the project to organize residents on the project. But they were so eager to just have guidance on how to structure and like develop a power mapping plan to get, actual solutions across the finish line, not just the Kaylee Work Release Center, but other projects across the region. And so because I had so many residents wanting to do this work, but had no know-how, I started just meeting at a church downtown. And the first meeting we had like 60, 70 people. And every meeting grew. I mean, the first email blast I did, we had almost 200 people show up or register for the newsletter. And so I said, okay, well, especially after meeting, Pastor Scott and different organizations, and hearing internally with the staff in Orange County and at the city of Orlando that sometimes there's just not political will because of the fear of that pushback. It all kind of, a light bulb went off. Like, nonprofits that are literally putting food in the hands of the most vulnerable that need a meal should not also have to come down to the Board of County Commission meeting and beg for money so that they can continue to do their job. They should focus on that work. And a campaign's purpose is to mobilize the residents that see that the resources these nonprofits are getting is not enough. Let's be the positive public pressure to push back and tell commissioners, hey, we want these projects. You get more flies with honey, so we just have a mission to be in the inboxes of our commissioners nonstop at every municipal and, county level, to be doing consistent educational events and candidate forums. Because we're not incorporated as a C3, we can tell people how to vote and do endorsements, which is what we're gearing up to this year. And being able to shine a spotlight on projects and hopefully fill the room when a project has a community meeting, so that we take up all the seats, so that the hateful people that want to see people in cages, literally, that's one of the solutions that one of the main leaders of the Stop the Soto Shelter actually emailed our mental health and homelessness division saying, actually, I'd like to see an alligator Alcatraz for the homeless out in the rural East, which is so far away from transit or jobs or wraparound resources. So, if that's your solution to treat people like garbage and put them in a landfill somewhere else so you don't have to feel guilty about throwing them away, that's on you and your morality. I hope that heaven accepts you. But for me, I can't continue to see every nonprofit, no matter how successful they are, not have enough resources because the demand is going up so fast, and not feel like I need to be accountable for using my voice to ensure that solutions are being thought through, and that we're not just cutting the same check every year to do the same thing. That the local governments, they're so good at just cutting a check and being like, this nonprofit will do it all.
They're checking off their box.
And then the nonprofit struggles in silence, just trying to do the best with the resources they have, trying to, I did nonprofit work for 10 years. One minute you're cleaning a toilet, the next minute you're having a meeting with a CEO of some banks that you can beg for money so you can pay your staff. One month you're not taking a paycheck because you literally just need to get through the month. And those stories never make it to the county that is patting themselves on the back for cutting the same check for the resources to be done elsewhere, and not feeling responsible to ensure that the data is showing results,
I so was glad you went there, because that's, I've been like, come on, say it. There needs to be results. I look at our donors as investors, and investors should expect a return on their investment. I literally have told Jerry Demings and others that I would love to see. I'm old school, right? So I can't do a lot of these graphs on computers and stuff, but I'm still that overhead with, the thing that
The projector.
like, right? Yeah. You throw it up on the thing and you have your transparencies. And I said, I want to lay the transparencies. I want to show where the money's been given, where the problem has been, and what's been the change since. And here's what I've learned. I didn't have to do that. I could go look and I can find it because it's all public record. You just got to go look at it. Sometimes we're flushing the same money into the same areas that we're getting no results. Okay. There should be results. There is a way. I believe Matthew's Hope has proven over and again. Now, the problem is that I'm looked at as a thorn sometimes towards with people, because they go, he pushes. Well, I'm pushing because you're wrong. And what I tell myself, I used to tell my kids this, and you're probably still young enough, you could probably be one of my kids. My kids are in their late 30s.
I'm 35.
Yeah, there you go. My child. But all kidding aside, I used to tell my girls, I said, I'm not going to tell you what to believe politically or theologically. I want you to know why you believe it and be able to articulate it. And if you can do that, even if I disagree with you, I will respect you. And what happens is people are just spewing things out there and never looking at the real truth. I had people in Brevard County that did a petition for us not to be there. Now, they didn't know that what they were trying to stop wasn't going to happen. Okay, they didn't go that far. They heard homeless, they went nuts. I got the coolest note. 3.5 years, we're going to be 3.5 years this past June, so we're going to soon be 4 years old. I I got a letter from one of the neighbors that said, "Hi, Pastor Scott. I'm your neighbor directly to the east from you." Okay. And she goes, "I want you to know that I got caught up in the whole petition thing and what was going on. And I got caught up in fear. You've been here 3.5 years now. We've not had a single problem. In fact, we don't even see homeless people around us. And you're literally eye shot from us. Oh, and by the way, my children love going to your preschool."
Thank you. Yes.
Okay. It's caught up false narrative. You got that because that's a political thing to use. And then we have people, again, we prey on people's fears. Crime is not, it's literally not, if you have a crime issue, chances are when you tie it back, what you really had is a mental health issue. It's like I've actually brought some of I have great relationships with most of the media. And I've called them out sometimes going, "You just did a story and you said a homeless person burnt this house down." That's a false narrative. What you had is an arsonist that burned a house down that happened to be homeless. He's going to burn the damn house down either way.
Yeah.
Okay. When we hear about things going on in certain areas, like we have Cocoa Village, Open Cocoa, it's the mental health guys. Those are guys typically that won't even come in my door. They're that far out there, right? But yeah, there's a problem, but there's a mental health problem. Well, guess what? Our government is literally pulled back on all money going towards mental health. So you have a problem, you want it solved, but to keep people happy, the government people are killing these programs financially, so they're not funded, and the problem just gets bigger.
Yeah. So this will be a big election year on the national level. How significant will local and state elections be in comparison?
Well, to tie that question to the point that Pastor Scott just made, you get what you pay for. And I'm not an elected official, so I can say this out loud. You have to be held accountable for how much you're paying attention. And if you want to just see something disappear, or else you're going to spend time sending emails and anger, then you're not holding yourself accountable for what more you could be doing. And frankly, when it comes to an election, if you sit back and either just vote R or D, because that's the fastest way for you to delineate who represents you. R or D is Democrat or Republican, just because you're like, I align with this,
just want to make sure,
and so you just vote that way, and you don't actually do research or even just Google them to see what they're about or go to one of their town halls to ask them questions. Then if they turn around and they don't fund your projects or they defund something that you're passionate about, that's really on you, right? And I don't know if people understand how much power they have. I have so many people, just because I put out that I do the research, that people call me and they're like, "Can you help me walk through my ballot?" I never knew ever 5 years ago that I would have that kind of power, right? But I'm using it for good, not evil. In actually making sure that I'm not telling them who to vote for, I'm telling them what the policies of each person are.
Educating them.
I'm educating them. Here's what they're about. And if you're about these things, this is what they're about. The problem is,
I'm calling you next,
is that many people run with really no platform, but their branding looks pretty, their mailers look pretty, and they say just like the poll tested consulting words that they know trigger emotions for people. If somebody has affordable housing on their mailer, but there's no substance to what that means, they might just be using that word to convince you to vote for them, because we all know there's a housing crisis. You have to be responsible enough at this moment, especially because every level of government has this problem, to do more than just a quick Google search and try to be hands-on with how you elect your leaders. And that will trickle down. You don't have to be an expert on homelessness and the environment and, water quality or whatever. You can just focus on that. Just try to be more engaged in that electoral process. And I hope that that will put enough pressure to get better people elected who will listen to the intersectionality of all of those issues. But again, we just have so much money that enters into the political spectrum. I don't know if they're a donor of yours, so these opinions are my own, but the tourism industry, for example, is causing homelessness. If you're our largest employer in the region and you're paying people wages that are not conducive to the cost of living, and we have homelessness skyrocketing, you are a conduit for homelessness. Now, of course, there's other factors. Our state legislature made it so that we can't increase impact fees. So developers are being able to continue to build, and then local governments have no choice to fund that infrastructure, like the roads and water, outside of raising your rates. So that's not Disney's fault or Universal's fault, but their wages, because their profits are going up, their wages should continue to go up, because then the local economy benefits, and then we can afford transit, then we can afford other things. And so I can go on and on and on about that, but for the most part, you have to be active and have those conversations and be willing to talk to candidates along the way and hold them accountable. Like affordable housing, what specific things do you mean that you will do?
That was so great. Lee, thank you so much for joining us and giving that advice.
We'll make her come back.
Yes. So we're going to have a part 2 with Lee next week. So if you're listening, watching, please come back and stay tuned for that. And everyone, please like, share, of course. We always ask you to do that, but come back and learn more from Lee, because I feel we have a lot more good advice.
And ask the questions. I try to tell people all the time, I'm very easy to find. There's way too many ways to find me. But if you ask the hard question, you're not going to say anything that's going to bother me. Sometimes I'm going to tell you, I don't have an answer for that. And I feel like anybody you really want to trust occasionally will say to you, I don't have an answer for that. Mm-hmm. But we don't know if we don't have the conversation.
Yep.
I don't know everything. And I'm not suggesting by this podcast that we know everything. But this is a conduit for conversation, a conduit for education, and know truth. But the bottom line is you also got to want to know the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that's where I think it's real important that, again, you think through why you believe, not because your neighbor believed it, not because you saw CNN or Fox say it, but because you turned the page a couple times and went, oh, okay, this is something. And I'll just touch on this one more time before we go. It's real important that people understand. If you get caught up on a single issue, you're creating your own demise. Mm-hmm. Because I've watched people, and abortion was a big one in our last national election. Mm-hmm. Nobody asked about pretty much anything else. That was the driving force between the Christian right, abortion, right? And as a pastor, that's a conversation we're not going to have here today. But here's what it will do, is the fact that when that became the single most important issue from the Christian right, that's a huge group of people, and nobody talked about what else. Mm-hmm. What else does this person or these people, this group believe? And what happens is that you may get what you want and lose everything else. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's real important you do your research. If I were you all, I would just go ahead and call Lee directly.
I'm gonna get up
every time.
I love it.
She's more than happy to take thousands of calls a day.
Hundreds of thousands.
And she'll walk through it with you. But all kidding aside, talk it out, think it out, process it. And don't use your emotion, use your thought process. God gave you a wonderful gift. It's called a brain. More importantly, he gave you a heart. Use it now and then.
Ask the questions and come back next week.
Yeah. Thank you.